The laughter was sharp, cutting through the heavy air of the gym like a blade. A young black belt, chest puffed and pride burning hot in his veins, pointed across the mats with a smirk that dripped arrogance. His voice carried so loudly that the echo seemed to taunt every corner of the room. He called out a challenge, not to a rival competitor, not to a fellow martial artist his own age, but to a man who had been quietly stretching in the corner. A man who looked as though time had already fought and won against him. His hair was more silver than dark, his shoulders rounded from years of burden rather than sport, and his movements were unhurried, deliberate, and understated. The gym hushed for a heartbeat, the silence broken by the black belt's mocking tone. He asked if the old man needed help standing, or perhaps a chair instead of the mat. A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the crowd, but most remained quiet, their eyes darting between the cocky young fighter and the stoic veteran he had targeted. Some looked away, embarrassed by the cruelty but unwilling to speak. The tension was unbearable, an injustice born not from fists or throws, but from disrespect, flung at someone who did not deserve it. The veteran did not answer. He simply straightened, bones creaking faintly as though echoing a distant memory of battles fought long ago. His eyes were not fiery or defensive. They were steady, calm, ancient with experience. There was no need for him to boast, no need to match cruelty with words. The silence itself was his reply, and it stung more sharply than any retort could have. This was the man they mocked, a soldier who had once walked through deserts that baked skin under merciless suns, who had crawled through jungles thick with rot and fear, who had seen men fall and had carried them in memory ever since. His back bore scars hidden beneath his shirt, and his knees ground together like stone whenever he moved. Yet his gaze never wavered, his dignity never faltered. Years before, he had worn the uniform of his nation. His boots had marched across lands foreign and hostile, where every footstep might have been his last. He remembered the smell of burning oil and the metallic taste of blood carried on the wind. He remembered the sound of distant artillery, the cries of comrades fading into silence. Nights had been long, filled with whispers of fear and letters folded inside breast pockets. Letters never sent, because some men did not come home. His body had broken in places, but his spirit had never bent. He had survived not because he was the strongest, but because he had learned endurance, patience, and unshakable will. And now here he was, standing in a gym filled with bright lights and polished mats, mocked not by an enemy across the sea, but by a boy with a black belt, who thought honor was something to be flaunted, not carried quietly. The young fighter strutted forward, his gi crisp, his black belt wrapped tightly, signifying years of training. He had trophies lined on his shelf at home, medals glinting in pictures on his phone, and the easy arrogance of one who had rarely faced humility. The crowd watched, some leaning in with curiosity, others shrinking back with unease. They could sense something brewing, something that made the air heavy, as though history itself had entered the room through the veteran's presence. The black belt raised his voice again, asking if the old man was ready. Still the veteran said nothing. He only stepped onto the mat, one slow stride at a time, each movement deliberate, unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. His silence was unsettling. The young fighter expected banter, excuses, or perhaps refusal. Instead, he found himself facing a wall of calmness that unsettled his confidence. The instructor looked uneasy, torn between stopping the farce and letting it play out. But the veteran simply bowed, not deeply, not ceremoniously, but with a quiet acknowledgement that seemed to whisper a lesson few there could yet understand. The black belt attacked quickly, perhaps too quickly, lunging with the energy of youth. His movements were sharp, practiced, meant to impress. The crowd leaned forward, anticipating a clash. But what happened next was nothing like they expected. The veteran did not move in haste. He shifted so subtly it was almost imperceptible, letting the young man's momentum betray him. A single step, a turn of the wrist, and the black belt was off balance, stumbling as though tripped by his own pride. Gasps broke the silence, but the veteran had not struck. He had merely redirected, using the young man's force against him. It was effortless yet devastating. The black belt flushed, humiliated. He rushed again, this time with more fury than focus. Again, the veteran remained composed, moving with an economy of motion that betrayed decades of discipline. Another redirection, another fall. The gym grew colder with every failed attempt, the mockery that had filled the room now silenced by awe. The veteran's face did not change. He was not smiling, not gloating. His silence was absolute, his expression unreadable. The lesson was unfolding not in words, but in action, written across the mat in movements honed by years of survival. A man who had learned to fight for his life in places where hesitation meant death did not need to prove himself to anyone. But when provoked, he revealed truths that medals and belts could never capture. The black belt slowed, his attacks hesitant now, his confidence cracked. He had never faced someone who fought without ego, without anger, without the need to dominate. It unnerved him, stripped him of the pride he had worn so carelessly. The veteran finally spoke, his voice low but resonant, carrying across the gym like a stone dropped into still water. He told the young man that belts fade, medals rust, and trophies gather dust, but the respect you give and the lives you honor last forever. The words cut deeper than any throw. They echoed in the room, sinking into everyone who heard them. The black belt froze, sweat dripping from his temple, eyes lowered. His arrogance had been shattered not by force, but by the quiet dignity of a man who had already faced far greater battles. The gym fell into silence. No one moved, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the bystanders, students, parents, fellow martial artists, stood in still respect. Not applause, not cheers, but silence. The same kind of silence soldiers hold for their fallen, the silence of respect too deep for words. The young man, trembling, bowed deeply before the veteran. It was not the shallow bow of routine, but one of genuine humility. For the first time, he understood that strength was not loud, not brash, not built upon mocking others. True strength was quiet, unshakable, forged in sacrifice. The veteran accepted the bow with no change in expression, only a small nod. Then he turned and walked off the mat, his steps unhurried, as though the matter was already behind him. The crowd parted to let him pass, the silence following him like a shadow of reverence. As the door closed behind him, the gym exhaled all at once. The young black belt sat on the edge of the mat, face flushed not from exertion but from shame and revelation. The instructor placed a hand on his shoulder, but no words were needed. The lesson had been delivered. The story of that moment would be told again and again in that gym, not of how an old man humiliated a young fighter, but how dignity silenced arrogance, how respect was demanded without words, how true power comes not from the belt around one's waist, but from the life one has lived and the battles one has endured. And somewhere, perhaps in a quiet home filled with photographs of comrades long gone, the veteran would sit alone, carrying both the weight of his past and the quiet honor of the present. He had not sought victory, only respect, and in silence he had claimed both. Strength is loud only to those who have never seen its truest form. To those who have, strength is silent, patient, enduring. It is the man who carries scars without bitterness, who bows without arrogance, who fights only when forced to. That is the strength that commands respect. To everyone watching, remember this. Respect costs nothing, yet it grants everything. Dignity may walk slowly, but it never stumbles. And sometimes the greatest victories are won not with fists, but with silence. If this story moved you, share where you're watching from. Leave your thoughts below about the lesson hidden in this moment, and subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet heroes who live among us, carrying battles most of us will never see.